Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for the segment, we have John Phillips, co-founder of PredictIt, the stock market for politics. And we're going to focus on European politics this afternoon. John, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Jill, it's great to be back. Thanks.
You know, it's so interesting. As I was looking over the notes for this particular segment, I wonder if, because we're so hyper-focused on Russia and Ukraine, if that could potentially be helping other leaders in Europe, because it might be challenging to shuffle the deck with such international focus on that one region in the world. So let's start with France. What do predicted traders think of Emmanuel Macron's chances of getting reelected in the April election?
Predicted traders say he's got a lock. He's at 92% odds right now to win re-election. And this was not a sure thing just 6 months ago. He gambled, I'm talking about Macron, that his attempts to intercede with Putin and talk some sense into him would produce peace. It didn't, but French voters seem to be giving him a lot of credit. So 92% odds for Macron to be reelected as president of France. And what's interesting is who they think his opponent's going to be. Now, the moderate candidate or more middle of the road candidate, they collapsed. And so now it's really a contest between two on the right. Marine Le Pen is the one that predicted traders think is going to come in second in the first round and therefore face Macron after that. And they give Le Pen some decent odds to do that. She's, let's see where we are. Yeah, she's at 61% odds to win the right to make it into a second round, compared to Zemmour, who's at 28% odds. And he's considered to be even more to the right of Le Pen. But they think Macron's got this, Jill.
You know, it's so interesting, John. Prior to Ukraine dominating the headlines, it really was around Boris Johnson and how he handled COVID holiday parties and so forth. That really seemed to be what was capturing European politics anyway. Will Boris Johnson remain British PM through May? And do you think this shift in coverage has kind of quieted that down for him?
Have you seen a single newspaper story about our favorite
Absolutely
subjects?
Not.
So
right.
No more Partygate. You know, his relatively low poll standards have actually, it's gone the other direction. So Johnson, like other incumbents in Europe, are benefiting from the problems in Ukraine, and Johnson, predicted traders say, has an 89% odds of remaining in power. That's a remarkable turnaround for this guy.
It really is. And there's one incumbent who is not being helped by the current crisis in Europe. Of course, it's Vladimir Putin. And John, I can't believe it's even a reasonable question if he will remain in power and what the odds are. But I mean, free elections over there really aren't free elections, right?
That's right. Well, I mean, as if he had to face a real election, what would happen? No, he's at 79% odds that he's going to stay in power through the end of 2022. Now, that could change, right? And it will change. If the ruble continues to plummet, it's lost 50% of its value. We talked last week about how the ruble was trading for under a penny to the dollar. And people's savings have been wiped out in Russia. There are protests now in 50 cities yesterday, and there were thousands of arrests. And getting arrested in Russia for criticizing the supreme leader is not a laughing matter. It's up to 15 years in prison now if you're arrested for speaking unfavorably of this military adventure, which is just sheer folly and killing a lot of people. Right.
Well, that's why a lot of journalists have left Russia. You can't, report fair journalism. That's kind of obvious. Let me ask you another question. This might seem a bit naive. Forgive me, I'm not an expert in European politics, but from my understanding, Putin had a decent working relationship with Angela Merkel. And now that she's no longer there, would you say she was maybe somewhat of a stabilizing force that kept him in check? And there really isn't someone who is able to do that now? I mean, he doesn't have anyone around him that he lives in a bubble that can give him, insight and perhaps question his motives.
Well, that's what happens with these autocrats, and it's not just restricted to Russian autocrats. They become in a bubble is the right way to put it. They become increasingly isolated. They have no one that really is willing or courageous enough to tell them the truth, because the people who've been speaking, saying unpleasant truths have generally been eliminated. So whether Merkel served that role, I don't know. But I do understand that she prided herself on being able to have communicate with Putin in a language that he understood. Cancellation of Nord Stream 2 was something that Merkel did not want to do, and yet with this announcement of the annexation of the two regions in Ukraine prior to the declaration of war, Germany has done a remarkable 180-degree turnaround on some of these issues having to do with military security, and that's that's one of the permanent changes. The other one, of course, is NATO, but I suspect you're about to ask me about that.
I am going to ask you about that. What the odds are that Finland or Sweden takes formal steps to join NATO this year, and how come they have not been part of NATO?
Well, there's significant. That's a great question. So there's significant percentage of the population has been against joining NATO in both Finland and Sweden. Of course, these are robust democracies, but they haven't joined NATO. Now that has changed. It was really unlikely that either of the countries would join NATO prior to this Russian adventurism in Ukraine. And now it's about a 50-50. It's 45% odds, according to predicted traders, that either Sweden or Finland will join NATO before the end of the year. That would be a remarkable turnaround and quite a rebuke of Vladimir Putin's strategy, which is to split NATO. In fact, what he's done, in addition to massacring thousands of innocent people in Ukraine, is he has united NATO and expanded NATO on the borders of Russia.
Interesting. Certainly not the strategy he was hoping to execute on, that's for sure. All right, John, appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thanks, Jill.